Our guest today, Dame Evelyn Glennie, is a virtuoso solo percussionist who travels the globe playing and recording with the world's finest orchestras and ensembles. She is notably recognized as the first musician to maintain a full-time career as a solo percussionist. Evelyn is also profoundly deaf and has honed her awareness of sound to such a degree that she describes her body as a resonating chamber. As the world's premier solo percussionist, Evelyn has been honored with multiple awards, including 2 Grammys and numerous other awards, too many to mention. So thank you so much for chatting with us this morning.
I began losing my hearing from the age of 8, and I had mumps round about the age of 6, 7 years old, but we're unsure whether that was the cause of it. And over the following perhaps 4 years or so, I found that my hearing was just steadily declining. And but at the age of 8, I started playing piano, and my whole musical upbringing started by playing by ear, really. However, by the time I was 12 years old, or 10 years old, really, I was using hearing aids. But what I found was that when I started percussion at the age of 12, I suddenly immersed in this much larger world that went beyond the piano playing. So a lot more instruments that had wider frequency ranges and many different attacks. So you're dealing with short, sharp sounds to sounds that were very low and elongated, very reverberant. And I found that this was very confusing with the aids. So I was hearing a lot of sound, but not the clarity. And I found it very difficult as regards to where the sound was coming from. And as a player, I found that my sense of touch was completely being lost. So inside, I felt myself being a very sensitive player because I knew about touch, but because I was struggling to hear things and deciphering the kind of complexities of sound, I was really, trying to strike things harder and harder and harder. So everything was getting louder and louder, and it was almost like overload in this part of the body. And I remember my percussion teacher, and he said, Evelyn, what would happen if you take your hearing aids out? And of course, I couldn't quite believe what he was saying. And he said, just take them out, and I'm going to strike this timpani, and I'd like you to place your hands on the wall of the tiny little music room. And that's exactly what I did. And I could not believe that not only could I pick up the attack of the stick, my teacher striking the timpani, but actually I could feel that through my hand, but perhaps more importantly, the resonance of the sound. So that was still continuing through my hand, but it wasn't coming through the ear. And as you changed the pitch of the drum, you could determine that pitch. Obviously, I wasn't skilled enough to say that was a C or a D flat or a G or whatever, but I knew that there was a difference as regards to the pitches that I was feeling through the hand. And this really was a complete and utter revelation. It was a completely different entry point to perceiving sound and understanding sound and having the patience with sound. So, and for me, it opened up this blanket or uncovered a whole kind of landscape whereby dynamics no longer had to be judged on what you could hear or not hear, because I was actually feeling the softest of softest dynamics if I was paying attention and if I was in the right kind of position to perceive that dynamic. So as the years went by, really, dynamics for me have been incredibly important. And, I see dynamics as, the kind of the variation in color. And when you open yourself up to thinking of the space that you're in as your instrument, rather than the marimba or the xylophone or the vibraphone or the drum kit or whatever, but when you see that space as your instrument, dynamics are suddenly they have a different dynamic really themselves. You can give a dynamic to a certain part of a room. You can give a dynamic to the people who are sitting up in the balcony. You can give a dynamic to the people sitting in the front row. You can give an illusion of a dynamic and not actually create any sound, but yet the audience, through their body language, will be thinking, is there, isn't there? And so their imagination plays a part in how a piece of music is interpreted. So I think that really that whole kind of step of trying to hear the sound to then trying to feel the sound and realizing that the aids, and of course nowadays hearing aids are much more sophisticated than they were then, but nevertheless, it was important to get that body working, you know, and having the support system through a teacher who was willing to work with you to make this journey something that you could actually participate in.